Hi, my name is Cameron Kennedy, and I'm going to be talking about attitudes towards death and dying. The time period I'm going to be covering is the 19th century. In the 19th century, the attitudes towards dying was heavily influenced by sudden death. Because of this, people started to fear the church. People in the 19th century were petrified that their loved ones or themselves might be subject to sudden death, which was a condition where someone appeared to be dead but was not actually dead. Typically, when someone experienced sudden death, they were buried or put into a morgue where they then woke up. Some people even waking up trapped inside of morgues or inside of coffins. For many people, being buried alive or being trapped was a fear. Because of this, death took place in the home where the families could watch over them and perform a long deathbed watch, which ensured that their loved ones were in fact dead. The family would then prepare the body for viewing in their home, and the burial process would take place, which was different from previous time periods because typically the bodies were prepared in the church and the burial was performed there as well. People strayed from the church because they thought the reason so many people were being subject to sudden death was because the church was rushing the process and not ensuring people were deceased. Towards the end of the 19th century, more and more people strayed from the church, and they started hiring people to take the body to a funeral parlor to be professionally embalmed and perform the burial process after the family had performed the long deathbed watch. Another attitude that was changed towards death was that people started to think less negatively about death. Since historically, graveyards were unkept and smelled poorly, when these private funeral homes started coming into play, they started to bury the bodies in a less overpopulated manner, and they would maintain the graveyard so it was a nice place for people to go visit their loved ones. Since people were able to have a nice place to visit their loved ones, it changed their attitudes towards death and dying, and they thought of it as a less dirty and negative thing. What we learned from the 19th century. Something we learned from this time period was to investigate and learn how to scientifically prove death. The 19th century was essential for our development as a society because it forced us to develop equipment and put strategies into place so that sudden death doesn't occur. For example, the development of the ECG, which is helpful because some heartbeats cannot be picked up by the human ear, or even measuring brain activity. Attitudes towards death in the media. The world has come a long way since the development of technology. After completing some research and reading a few articles on how media affects death, I was able to come to the conclusion that previously death was a bit of a taboo, and people didn't like to talk about the experience. Social media has given us an outlet to educate and speak about the emotions and things that come along with death, and the way our healthcare system deals with death. Social media provides a platform to reach many people at once. Although there is some controversy around this because some people are uncomfortable with the thought of death being portrayed on social media, I think it's important for us to continue using social media to minimize the taboo around it. At the end of the day, death is something we will all experience at some point in our lives. Although the media can be a great tool for education, it must be used responsibly. Because the media tends to take death and tragedy for views, and they tend to dramatize stories, it turns death into something that it's not, and it scares viewers and society. And I chose a painting to portray death. The image I chose is pictured on the right. The image I chose was named Ophelia, painted by John Everett Millais. The reason I chose this piece of artwork to symbolize the topic of death and dying is because it's very peaceful. A lot of the images I found when searching for an image to portray death and dying was more evil-based. When I saw this, I immediately knew this was the one. I did some research on the image and found out the painting was done in many different sessions. The greenery in the river was painted outside, which was very unusual for paintings in this time period. The painter also painted the outside scenery in many different sessions and time periods during the year, so the dead greenery and new flowers can be visualized at the same time. To me, this is symbolic because the dead greenery symbolizes the end of life on Earth, and the new buds and flowers symbolize the beginning that comes after death. This piece of artwork taught me that death doesn't always have to be evil or portrayed negatively, and it can be visually peaceful. Something I found interesting was that the painting was done in 2 separate pieces, and once the nature piece of this painting was done being illustrated, John had someone pose in a bathtub for hours on end in a dress. They used oil lamps to keep the water warm, but despite their attempts, the woman posing got very cold and fell ill. Factors affecting the understanding of death. To me, the biggest factors affecting the understanding of death is culture, religion, and media. And these are my references. Thanks for listening.